All right, we're back on our original problem here where we had three distinct pieces of code that were really repeating the same piece of code with only a couple different things changed. And in this case, it was the starting and ending values of the numbers we wanted to sum up. So we want to take one of these blocks of code and we want to do something on it called abstraction. Okay, so we want to say, what is it that's different? Everything, 90% of the things in these blocks of code are identical. What are the things that are different? That process is called abstraction. And the thing that's different is the starting and ending values. So it's a good idea to keep track of that and think about it before you start writing your method. So I want to move this code one time into its own method. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to create a method. And this method is going to be called sum. And I know that it needs a value to, we have to provide it a value where we want it to start. And put a comma here. We have to give it a value where we want it to end. So in this case, the start is 35 and the end is 45. In this case, it was 20 and 30. So I got red squigglies here because I'm not done creating my method definition, my method signature here. So the start is the parameter I'm going to use for where my code should start. End is the parameter for where it should end. I have to define those just like we do with any variable. I have to declare them. Start is going to be an int, so I'm going to put the word int in front of it. And end is going to be an int, so I'll put an int in front of that. So this is technically the method signature, the name followed by the parameter list. And we're always going to have a block of code that runs. To be consistent here, I will put my opening curly brace up there because that's how the rest of these are written. Okay. And if you remember from our previous video, we have to have some other things up in front of here. Our method needs to be public. So we're going to make this one public so that it can be accessed throughout our code. Okay. I don't have a return type. So for now, I'm going to say void. We're not going to return any information. Because we're going to use this method inside this main class, and this is a static method that we're going to use to call it, it will also need to be static. So I'm going to add the keyword static there. We'll talk more about why that has to be later on. So there's our method definition line, our method signature. I like to just call the whole thing signature, even though technically the book says only this part is the signature. What are we going to do with it? We're going to use the same code that we used up here, and I'm going to pull it from the first one. I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to put it down here. So this method is going to declare a variable, an accumulator variable called sum, and it's going to have a for loop that starts at, now this is where we have to change something. Starting value and ending value, instead of starting at 1 and going to 10, we're going to substitute those parameters here. Start and end. Okay. And down here, if I want to, I could actually put those parameters in here. I'm not going to do that yet because there's some issues with this that I want to talk about later. So I have just created a method here. The method is called sum that requires us to pass in a start value and an end value. It's going to go through that loop, add the numbers to an accumulator, and print out the result. So up here, I'm going to get rid of all of these. And I am just going to say, I'm going to call the method sum, and I'm going to pass it the values 1 and 10. Okay, so my main method now is not going to do anything but call this other method, passing in a 1 to start and a 10 as a second parameter to end. And I'll go ahead and run this. Sum from 1 to 10 is 55. It works just fine. I can call sum again with 20 and 30 from my main method. It still says 1 to 10 because I haven't changed anything in here yet for a good reason, but it tells me the sum from 20, 30 to 30 is 275, which I believe is the correct answer. All right, so what's the problem with this? Well, one of the problems with this is that we really don't want our methods to be printing out to the console. Because when we write methods, the idea is we can reuse them. I've reused this method twice up here. But I may not be reusing this in a program that writes information to the console. I might be writing a program that uses a GUI, or a program that runs over the internet and sends the result back over the internet in some way. Maybe it's encapsulating it in HTML or something. We don't know. So it's never a good idea to do user input or output in your methods. So my system out.println probably shouldn't be in here. Instead, this method should be returning the answer to us. So instead of void, I'm going to say this method's going to return an int to us, which means at the end here, rather than printing information, I am going to say return, and I am going to return the sum, which we know is an int because we defined it as an int right here. So now this is a value returning method. Before it was a void method, and now it is a value returning method. In this case, it returns an int. Now the question is, returns it where? Where does it return to? It returns it right back here to where it was called. And then we have to do something with it. What do we want to do with it? Well, we were just printing it out before, so let's do that. So let's do the sum of 1 through 10 is, and then we'll just concatenate. I probably better put a little space there. The sum of 1 through 10 is, and then we're calling, excuse me, this has to go around, parentheses has to go there. And then we're concatenating on the answer that is returned from this method. So when our program executes, it's going to see the sum 1 through 10 here. It's going to go down here. It's going to add up the numbers from 1 through 10. This is going to return the answer to us and substitute it into our sentence here. So let's do that. The sum of 1 through 10 is 55. Likewise, I could do the sum of 20 through 30 is, and I'll concatenate onto here, and I'll put my closing parenthesis on there and take it off here. Okay, so my print line statement, the sum of 20 through 30 is, and I'm calling the method, this is the method call, sum 20, 30, passes the 20 into start, the 30 gets passed into the end parameter. It runs through, does the loop going from 20 to 30, calculates the sum, and in the end returns it and substitutes it right here where we called it for the end of our sentence that we're concatenating there. Sum of 20 through 30 is 275. And then finally, I don't even remember what the third one was anymore. Was it maybe 35 through 45? is, and then I concatenate onto here sum of 35 comma 45. Oops. All right, so now our code is not repeated. We repeat it one time. We've used the process of abstraction to turn the parameters into the two things that would be different about every time this code runs. And when we call it, we pass the arguments that we want into these parameters. Again, right here, they're arguments. They get stored in these parameter variables, and they get used in this block of code. So I call it with the argument of 1 and 10. 1 gets stored in start, 10 gets stored in end. It does the code, runs the loop, gets the total, passes it right back here where it's substituted into our print line statement and concatenated with the rest of our sentences. And that's the process of creating a method from an existing code using abstraction.